Stand relieved.
Very well.
The 1980 science fiction thriller The Final Countdown captured our imagination with its time-traveling aircraft carrier and tantalizing what-if scenario at Pearl Harbor. But beneath its thrilling exterior lies a labyrinth of production challenges, career-defining decisions, and technical innovations that most viewers never fully appreciated. What if the film you thought you knew was actually a revolution in naval military cinema, disguised as a straightforward sci-fi adventure? What if the performances you've watched dozens of times contain subtle choices that completely transform their meaning when you know what was happening behind the scenes? Let's pull back the curtain on one of the most ambitious military Hollywood collaborations ever attempted and reveal the extraordinary circumstances that shaped this cult classic. The revelations from cast and crew members paint a picture that changes how you see every frame of this beloved time travel paradox. The Final Countdown presents itself as a straightforward military sci-fi thriller, but the film's true significance remains hidden in plain sight to this day. What most fans never realized is that this production represented a perfect storm of conflicting forces. Hollywood ambition colliding with military precision, old guard acting legends meeting emerging talent, and practical effects wizardry fighting against the unforgiving elements of actual aircraft carrier operations. The film's secrets unfold across three revelatory pillars that transformed what could have been a forgettable B-movie into an enduring cult classic. First, the unprecedented military access that came with near-impossible filming conditions. Second, the clash of acting generations that created unexpected depth beneath the dialogue. And finally, the technological gambles that pushed practical effects to their absolute limits just before the CGI revolution would change everything. The story of The Final Countdown isn't just about a warship traveling through time. It's about an entire production caught between eras, forced to innovate in ways that would quietly influence military films for decades to come. But to understand how these elements converged, we need to step back and examine the unique moment in film history that made this unusual project possible in the first place. When The Final Countdown began production in 1979, American cinema stood at a crucial crossroads. The revolutionary new Hollywood era was giving way to the blockbuster age ushered in by Jaws and Star Wars. Studios were increasingly looking for high-concept projects with commercial appeal that could capitalize on cutting-edge special effects while still attracting established stars. United Artists, riding high after the success of Apocalypse Now and Rocky II, took a gamble on an unusual military sci-fi premise from producers Peter Vincent Douglas and Lloyd Kaufman. Their script about a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier transported back in time to December 6, 1941, the day before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, offered a tantalizing what-if scenario that blended historical significance with speculative fiction. The production secured Don Taylor as director, whose experience with both Escape from the Planet of the Apes and Damien Omen 2 suggested he could handle both the science fiction elements and the tension-filled military sequences. Taylor's methodical approach to filmmaking would prove crucial for a production that needed to balance Hollywood storytelling with the operational realities of filming on an active nuclear aircraft carrier. In a remarkable precedent, The Final Countdown became the first feature film granted permission to film extensive sequences aboard an operational Nimitz-class nuclear aircraft carrier, with the U.S. Navy providing unprecedented access to the USS Nimitz for 28 days of shooting. What no one involved could have predicted was how this unique collaboration between Hollywood and the military would create a perfect storm of creative tension, technical challenges, and career-defining choices that would haunt the production at every turn. Kirk Douglas, already a Hollywood legend approaching his mid-60s, surprised many by taking the role of Captain Matthew Yelland. What most fans never figured out was that Douglas wasn't simply playing another military commander. He was deliberately channeling aspects of his own father's stern remoteness, creating layers of authority and isolation that weren't explicitly in the script. The real revelation came from Martin Sheen, fresh off his transformative experience filming Apocalypse Now in the Philippines. Crew members later revealed that Sheen arrived on set still processing the emotional aftermath of that notoriously difficult production. His performance as Warren Lasky, the civilian observer, carries subtle traces of trauma, that add unexpected depth to what could have been a straightforward role. What appeared to casual viewers as mere skepticism was actually Sheen, working through his own recent confrontation with mortality during the heart attack he suffered while filming Apocalypse Now. What most people miss, confided a crew member years later, was that Kirk and Martin were essentially from different planets as actors. Kirk was old school, arrive prepared, hit your marks, project to the back row. Martin was bringing this intense, internalized method approach. Their scenes together have this incredible tension, not because they were at odds personally, but because they represented completely different approaches to the craft. Catherine Ross, already established from The Graduate, and Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, found herself navigating a predominantly male environment, both in character and on set. Cast and crew later confirmed that Ross deliberately maintained professional distance during filming, a choice that enhanced her character's sense of isolation and disorientation when transported to 1941. Behind their composed performances lay a difficult truth. All three leads were fighting private battles. Douglas was confronting his advancing age in an industry obsessed with youth. Sheen was recovering from a near-death experience. And Ross was navigating a career increasingly limited by Hollywood's gender biases. These personal struggles infused their performances with layers of meaning that transformed standard genre characters into something far more nuanced. But the most consequential casting decision would prove to be one that almost didn't happen at all. What most fans never realized is that the entire production nearly collapsed just weeks before filming was scheduled to begin. The original actor, cast as Commander Richard Owens, the operations officer who becomes central to the film's moral dilemma, suddenly withdrew due to scheduling conflicts. This 11th-hour departure sent the production into crisis mode, with millions in naval cooperation agreements hanging in the balance. The casting director made a fateful suggestion. James Ferrantino, a television actor primarily known for series work with limited film experience. Initial resistance from the studio was strong. They wanted a more established film name for the crucial role that would carry much of the film's emotional weight. Production documents revealed in 2010 show that the studio had initially approached both Donald Sutherland and Nick Nolte for the Commander Owens role, with both actors passing due to concerns about the extensive naval filming requirements. What transformed this potential disaster into the film's secret strength was director Don Taylor's unconventional decision. Rather than watering down the role to accommodate a less experienced film actor, Taylor and the screenwriters actually expanded Owens's character, giving him the pivotal connection to Senator Chapman, played by Charles Durning, and making him the emotional center of the time paradox. That last-minute casting crisis completely changed the emotional architecture of the film, revealed screenwriter David Ambrose years later. We had to scramble to rewrite significant portions, which inadvertently gave the story more heart than it had originally. The gamble paid off. Ferrantino's performance brought a vulnerability and moral conflict that created the perfect counterbalance to Douglas's stoic captain. What began as a production emergency resulted in the character dynamics that would give the film its lasting emotional impact. But the real challenges were only beginning, as the production would soon discover the true meaning of military precision when they boarded the USS Nimitz. No one in Hollywood had ever attempted what the Final Countdown production faced, shooting a major feature film on an active nuclear aircraft carrier with a full complement of 5,000 sailors and 70 aircraft. The USS Nimitz wasn't a set. It was a massive military installation with strict protocols, security concerns, and an operational tempo that would not and could not accommodate typical film production indulgences. What most viewers never appreciated is the extraordinary physical toll this environment took on the cast and crew. The Nimitz's labyrinthine interior featured over 2,000 compartments, connected by narrow passageways and steep ladders. Camera equipment had to be manually hauled through these tight spaces, with the ship's constant motion creating nausea even among veteran crew members. Kirk Douglas, despite being in his 60s, insisted on navigating these challenges without special accommodation. Kirk would be drenched in sweat, climbing those ladders between decks, recalled a crew member, but he refused to show weakness. He said it would undermine his authority as the captain if he couldn't handle what the actual sailors did daily. The punishing conditions extended beyond physical discomfort. The production was subject to military operational security, meaning many scenes had to be quickly rescheduled or abandoned when naval operations took priority. Planned shooting sequences were routinely interrupted by authentic flight operations, creating a constant state of adjustment. Martin Sheen later revealed that the experience triggered uncomfortable flashbacks to his time on the riverboat sets of Apocalypse Now. There was this constant mechanical noise, he explained, the feeling of being trapped in this metal environment with no escape. Some days, I had to find a quiet corner and just breathe through it. The most challenging aspects came during flight operations. The aircraft launch sequences that give the film its most spectacular visuals were filmed during actual F-14 Tomcat launches, with cameras mounted in highly restricted areas of the flight deck. Sound recording was virtually impossible due to the 150-plus decibel noise levels. Every line of dialogue in those sequences had to be carefully re-recorded in post-production. Perhaps most remarkably, the film's crew had to operate under the same safety protocols as naval personnel. One wrong step on the flight deck during operations could prove fatal, leading to a level of tension rarely experienced on even the most difficult Hollywood productions. But these extraordinary challenges yielded visual authenticity that would have been impossible to achieve otherwise, and in those authentic details lie clues that most viewers completely miss. The most overlooked aspects of The Final Countdown are hidden in plain sight throughout the film, subtle details that transform its meaning when finally noticed. These seemingly minor elements reveal the true sophistication beneath the film's straightforward premise. First is the deliberate visual language created by cinematographer Victor J. Kemper. What appears to casual viewers as standard military filming actually contains a sophisticated color strategy. Notice how scenes set in the present day on the Nimitz feature a cool blue-gray palette, while sequences with the reconnaissance team in 1941 shift to warmer, more saturated gold tones. This subtle color coding creates a subconscious temporal awareness that guides viewers through the time shift narrative. We wanted to create a visual distinction between time periods without being heavy-handed about it, Kemper revealed years later. The color temperature shifts are gradual enough that most viewers never consciously register them, but they feel the difference. A second overlooked element involves Kirk Douglas's performance choices. Watch closely during scenes where Captain Yelland is weighing whether to interfere with history by preventing the Pearl Harbor attack. Douglas incorporated a subtle hand gesture, touching his wedding ring, that never appears in any other context. This physical behavior, confirmed by Douglas in a later interview, was his way of suggesting the character's awareness that altering history might erase his own family's existence. Perhaps most significantly, the film contains an elaborate foreshadowing system through its background details. The most striking example occurs early in the film, before the time travel event. During a briefing scene, attentive viewers can spot a historical photo of Pearl Harbor visible on the wall behind Martin Sheen. This exact visual composition is mirrored later when Sheen's character witnesses actual Japanese aircraft through a window, creating a visual rhyme that suggests the predestination paradox at the heart of the story. A production design document discovered in 2018 revealed an elaborate system of visual echoes planted throughout the film. Over 30 specific set details were deliberately designed to foreshadow later developments, though most viewers typically notice fewer than 5 of these planted clues. These subtle artistic choices reveal the true sophistication beneath what many dismissed as a simple, high-concept thriller. But achieving this level of detail required navigating conflicts that threatened to derail the entire production. The greatest conflicts during The Final Countdown weren't in the script, but behind the camera, where 3 powerful forces engaged in a constant struggle: the filmmaker's creative ambitions, the military's operational requirements, and the unforgiving realities of the production's budget. What most fans never realized is that the U.S. Navy maintained unprecedented creative input throughout production. The agreement that allowed filming on the USS Nimitz came with strict conditions. The military would have approval rights over how their personnel and equipment were portrayed, with naval technical advisors present during every scene. This arrangement created a constant push-pull between dramatic needs and military accuracy. We'd set up these dramatic scenes with heightened dialogue, recalled one assistant director, and then the naval advisor would step in and say, "That's not how a real officer would handle this situation." We had to rewrite dialogue on the spot, sometimes minutes before shooting. This tension extended to the film's central moral question about interfering with the Pearl Harbor attack. Early script drafts contained much more explicit debate about the military's responsibility to prevent the deaths of thousands, even at the cost of altering history. Naval reviewers pushed back strongly against this framing, concerned it portrayed military leadership as hesitant in the face of a direct threat to American forces. Producer Peter Douglas found himself mediating constant compromises between his father, Kirk's desire for more character development, director Don Taylor's visual ambitions, and the Navy's insistence on operational realism. These behind-the-scenes negotiations consumed hours of precious shooting time, forcing the production to abandon several planned sequences. The budget created additional friction. Despite its ambitious premise, The Final Countdown was operating with significantly fewer resources than contemporary science fiction films, like Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The financial constraints became most evident during the time vortex sequences, which required extensive special effects work on a limited budget. We had this incredible vision for how the time portal would look, revealed special effects supervisor Maurice Binder, better known for his iconic James Bond title sequences. But we kept having to scale back as costs mounted. What you see in the film is maybe 60% of what we had designed. Perhaps most revealing was the battle over the film's conclusion. Original script drafts featured a much more definitive ending that explained the time loop paradox. Studio executives, concerned about audience confusion, pushed for this more explicit resolution. But the filmmakers fought for the more ambiguous ending we see in the final film, believing it would give the story lasting power. This creative conflict produced a film caught between commercial accessibility and artistic ambition. But the greatest irony lay in how these compromises would ultimately secure the film's legacy. In a twist worthy of the film's own time paradox, The Final Countdown's most significant strengths emerged from what initially appeared to be its greatest weaknesses. This irony shaped both the production and its long-term cultural impact in ways no one involved could have predicted. The first great irony involved the film's special effects. The production's limited budget for the time vortex sequences, which many critics at the time dismissed as underwhelming, inadvertently forced a greater emphasis on the authentic aircraft carrier operations. These genuine military sequences, captured with unprecedented access, have aged remarkably well compared to the era's more ambitious but now dated special effects in bigger budget films. "We were actually disappointed we couldn't do more elaborate effects," admitted producer Peter Douglas years later. But in hindsight, the restraint served the film well. The reality of those F-14 Tomcats launching off the Nimitz deck has a power that no amount of special effects could match. An even more poignant irony emerged in Martin Sheen's involvement. The actor took the role partly as a recovery project after his near-fatal heart attack during Apocalypse Now. Sheen later revealed that the structured environment of the naval production, with its rigid schedules and protocols, provided exactly the disciplined framework he needed to rebuild his health and confidence. The very military rigidity that created so many production challenges became personally restorative for one of its stars. Perhaps the greatest irony lay in Kirk Douglas's career trajectory. The legendary actor had initially seen The Final Countdown as a commercial project to finance more personal films. Yet this seemingly straightforward role as Captain Yelland would be among his last major leading performances, unexpectedly becoming part of his cinematic legacy. The film he regarded somewhat pragmatically became, for many younger viewers, their primary introduction to his screen presence. Kirk Douglas was 63 during filming, making him older than most active Navy captains. Naval advisors initially raised concerns about his age authenticity, but Douglas convinced them by completing the Navy's standard physical fitness test for officers, performing at a level that would have qualified him for active duty despite being decades older than typical recruits. The final twist came in the film's reception. United Artists marketing positioned it as a straightforward action thriller, downplaying its philosophical aspects. This initially limited its critical reception, with many reviewers dismissing it as merely a vehicle for military hardware footage. Yet this very mischaracterization would later help the film find its true audience through home video and cable broadcasts, where viewers could engage with its deeper questions at their own pace. These ironies collectively transformed what might have been a forgotten genre entry into something more enduring, a transformation that wouldn't become apparent until years after its release. The theatrical release of The Final Countdown in 1980 met with decent but unspectacular box office returns and mixed critical response. Many reviewers fixated on the ambiguous ending or compared the film unfavorably to bigger-budgeted science fiction spectacles of the era. What no one could have anticipated was how the advent of home video would completely transform the film's fortunes and cultural footprint. When The Final Countdown reached VHS in 1981, it found itself perfectly positioned for the emerging home video market. The film's blend of military hardware, recognizable stars, and high-concept premise made it an ideal rental choice. Video store owners reported that it became one of the most consistently rented titles in the early VHS era, particularly in military communities. It was one of those films that built its audience one VCR at a time, recalled a former United Artists distribution executive. The weekly rental numbers never dropped off the way they did with most theatrical releases. People were recommending it to friends, and military families especially embraced it. This second life through home video coincided with a broader cultural moment: the military rehabilitation in American popular culture during the Reagan era. As public sentiment toward the armed forces warmed following the post-Vietnam nadir, The Final Countdown's respectful portrayal of naval operations found growing appreciation. The film's breakthrough extended to technical recognition as well. Aviation enthusiasts and military history buffs began celebrating the film for its unprecedented documentation of carrier operations. The sequences of F-14 Tomcats intercepting Japanese Zeros, combining authentic modern aircraft with meticulously recreated historical planes, became reference points for how to film military aviation convincingly. Cable television further cemented the film's growing status. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, The Final Countdown became a staple of weekend afternoon broadcasting, introducing it to viewers who had missed its theatrical run. Each broadcast cultivated new admirers who appreciated its straightforward storytelling and authentic military details. By the time DVD technology emerged in the late 1990s, The Final Countdown had developed a substantial enough following to warrant special edition releases with restored picture quality and behind-the-scenes features. These releases revealed production details that enhanced appreciation for the film's technical achievements under difficult circumstances. The film had accomplished something remarkable. It had found its ideal audience through persistence rather than initial impact. This gradual recognition would influence military-themed filmmaking in ways that continue to resonate decades later. The influence of The Final Countdown extends far beyond its immediate cultural footprint, rippling through subsequent decades of military-themed entertainment in ways both subtle and profound. What began as a modest science fiction premise evolved into a template for how to authentically capture military operations on film. Most significantly, the film pioneered the collaborative model between Hollywood and the U.S. military that would later produce blockbusters like Top Gun. The production team's ability to negotiate unprecedented access to the USS Nimitz created a blueprint for future filmmakers seeking military cooperation. The naval officers who worked on The Final Countdown later cited it as evidence that Hollywood could respectfully depict military operations while still creating entertaining fiction. That film fundamentally changed the military's approach to Hollywood, revealed a former Department of Defense film liaison. It demonstrated you could maintain operational security and still get compelling footage. The protocols developed during that production became standard for military Hollywood collaborations for decades. The film's influence extended to technical filmmaking approaches as well. The techniques developed for shooting in the cramped, constantly moving environment of an aircraft carrier, including innovative camera mounts and lighting solutions, became standard practices for filming in military environments. Directors like Tony Scott and Michael Bay would later adopt and expand upon these methods in their military-themed blockbusters. Perhaps most enduringly, The Final Countdown established a narrative approach that respected military protocol while still exploring moral complexities. The film's central question, whether to interfere with history to prevent Pearl Harbor, created a template for military fiction that engaged with ethical dilemmas without undermining the professionalism of service members. This approach influenced television as well as film. Shows like JAG, Last Resort, and even elements of Battlestar Galactica echo the film's balance of military procedure and moral questioning. The respectful depiction of chain of command, combined with genuine ethical stakes, created a more sophisticated template than the simplistic military portrayals that had dominated much of previous popular culture. The film's visual documentation of the Nimitz-class carrier has taken on historical significance beyond its entertainment value. Naval historians and military educators have used footage from The Final Countdown to illustrate carrier operations from this period, as it captured authentic procedures that evolved in subsequent decades. Even the film's apparent weaknesses became influential. The ambiguous ending, initially criticized for leaving too many questions unanswered, anticipated the more open-ended conclusions that would later become more acceptable in mainstream science fiction. What seemed like narrative frustration in 1980 appears prescient when viewed through contemporary eyes. But beyond these tangible influences lies a more fundamental contribution, one that explains why the film continues to resonate with new generations of viewers. The enduring appeal of The Final Countdown ultimately rests on something deeper than its military hardware or time travel premise. What most fans never fully articulate is how perfectly the film captures a universal human dilemma, the tension between duty and intervention, between following established protocol and taking moral initiative when history itself hangs in the balance. This central paradox, dramatized through the crew's decision about whether to prevent Pearl Harbor, resonates far beyond its specific historical context. It speaks to a fundamental question we all face. When do we accept the flow of events, and when do we attempt to alter their course? The film works because that dilemma never ages, observed James Ferrantino years after the release. Everyone understands what it means to be caught between protocol and conscience. We've all wondered what we'd do if we could go back and change a pivotal moment. What gives this philosophical question such power in The Final Countdown is how it's grounded in the authentic military environment. The film respects that Navy officers and sailors operate within a framework of duty, orders, and chain of command. This isn't abstract moralizing, but practical decision-making with real consequences for real people. The film's subtle brilliance lies in how it reframes our understanding of military service itself. Rather than portraying service members as simply following orders, it presents them as thoughtful, ethical actors who must weigh competing responsibilities. In Captain Yellen's measured consideration of whether to intercept the Japanese attack force, we see not indecision, but the careful deliberation of a commander weighing historical consequences against immediate duty. Time has only strengthened the film's central questions. In our era of increasing awareness about historical injustices and debates over when intervention is justified, The Final Countdown's premise has taken on new relevance. The questions it raises about whether we can or should attempt to correct history speak directly to contemporary discussions about historical responsibility and reparation. When viewed with fresh eyes, the film reveals itself as not merely a military adventure with a science fiction hook, but a thoughtful exploration of how we reconcile our knowledge of past tragedies with our power, or powerlessness, to affect them. This depth beneath the straightforward surface explains why The Final Countdown continues to engage new viewers decades after more lavishly produced contemporaries have faded from memory. By embedding philosophical questions within authentic military operations, the film created something rare: entertainment that provokes genuine reflection about how we relate to history and responsibility. And in that achievement lies a powerful invitation to contemporary viewers. As we've pulled back the curtain on The Final Countdown, we've discovered a film far richer and more significant than casual viewers might suspect. From the unprecedented military access that made its authentic carrier sequences possible, to the personal struggles that informed its leading performances, to the technical innovations developed under difficult filming conditions. This modest science fiction thriller quietly made an outsized impact on military cinema. The next time you watch F-14 Tomcats launch from the USS Nimitz, or witness Kirk Douglas weighing his responsibility to history, you'll see these moments through new eyes. You'll notice the subtle color shifts between time periods, recognize the carefully planted visual echoes, and appreciate the genuine naval operations captured on film, perhaps for the final time in that transitional era. The final countdown reminds us that sometimes the most interesting stories exist in the gap between what we think we're watching and what's actually unfolding before us. Like the time vortex at the center of its narrative, the film continues to swirl with hidden meanings and connections that reward closer attention. If you've experienced these revelations about a film you thought you knew, hit the like button and share in the comments which behind-the-scenes detail most surprised you. After all, the best cult classics are those we continually rediscover together, finding new layers for each viewing.